Hi guys, it's Angela here. In today's video I'm going to be talking about the role of women in the Jehovah's Witness organisation, and in particular the role of Black Caribbean women in the organisation. And the reason I'm going to be talking about this is I really do believe that there are cultural differences when it comes to the different cultural and racial groups of women in the organisation. So stay with me right to the end as I discuss this intriguing subject. Now please forgive me because I have a bit of a cold and my voice is a little bit weak. Some of you might actually like it, the deep husky sound. Well, I try to please. So guys, in terms of the role of women in the Jehovah's Witness organisation, well, the role of women isn't too dissimilar to many traditional churches or traditional Christian churches, in that the role of women is one that is women are seen but are not heard. Now, and this is very unlike modern, non-denominational, very charismatic, very modern day churches in which all voices, men, women, young, old, and all the different cultural groups and backgrounds, their voices are celebrated. But I'm going to be specifically talking about Jehovah's Witnesses because this is what I've known for many years, but also I will be comparing that to a non-denominational church that I used to go to, a charismatic church that I used to go to, and I will compare the differences in the two. So Jehovah's Witnesses base their belief on many of the Bible's accounts around the role of women, and again lots of traditional churches have that view, although we've seen in recent years that some of those traditional churches have changed their views and in a modern society has recognised the value that women bring to society and therefore has embraced women as part of the church leadership. Now, the role of women in the Jehovah's Witness organisation stems very much from the Jehovah's Witnesses' interpretation of how women are seen in the Bible, and that is very much that women can be seen but not heard, and women are treated inferior, they're second class, and they are not equal to men. Now, most Jehovah's Witnesses will never come out and say that in so many words. They just won't. But that is the reality, and that is how women are treated in the organisation. And they hold this view because of their interpretation of the Bible's perspective, that that God is head and Jesus is under God, of which man is to be in subjection to Christ, and therefore women are to be in subjection to man. And therefore, because this hierarchy is interpreted in the Bible as such, therefore women are seen as second rate, they're low class. So men typically are seen as head of the household and head over women in the dealings of the congregation, although Jehovah's Witnesses will very firmly state that Christ is the head of the congregation, which the Bible does state that, but in a modern, realistic and practical way, they still view that as man being over the organisation. Hence why we have all men on the leadership team, the governing body team, and also in positions, district overseer, circuit overseer, elders, ministerial servants, etc. There is no women whatsoever in the leadership team and the leadership structure. There never has been, and as far as Jehovah's Witnesses doctrines go, there never will be, because they really see women as being in subjection. So this really is a really demeaning position for women, because as we know, as we look around the world, look in the world around us, women hold positions in so many amazing ways. Women's doctors, scientists, lawyers, you know, women have been to the moon. Here in the UK, we've had 2 women leaders of the country. Okay, I'm not going to get into politics, but you know, we've had 2 women that have led the country. We have leaders that are women in so many important aspects and so many important roles in the world, in our lives, in the community, and that the world, I think, recognises the value that women brings to society, and women have just as much knowledge, intellect and valuable contribution as a man. However, that is not recognised amongst Jehovah's Witnesses. Women are to be in subjection to men. They are there to be a helper to a man and to their husbands. And even if they have grown sons, in that respect, when it comes to Christian matters, women, a mother is still to be in subjection to the grown man, her son. And so really the woman's role is to, you know, have kids, clean the house, you know, can't make any decisions on their own, and to, you know, bow to the will of their husbands, or if they're unmarried, be in subjection still to the men in the congregation. This is taken to such an extreme that women still, even within the congregation, are dictated to around what they can wear. Now, if they have a husband, then their husband have to be seen to be presiding over the household, over their wife and any children. They have to make sure that their family is studying, you know, they're dedicating sufficient time to personal study, going out in the ministry, going out in field service, and doing basically what he sets. And if she's unmarried, then while she won't have a husband doing that, then the overseers and the elders in the congregation will still be looking to ensure that a woman who is single is still doing her personal study, going out in field service, etc. And I grew up in a household where both my parents were baptised, but my father stopped going. So we got to a point where my mother was the head of the household in that respect, in the sense that she was, you know, making sure that all her children were studying and going along to the meetings. And the elders in our book study congregation would sort of always just keep a careful eye, just to make sure that my mum was conducting personal studies with us as children and making sure we was going out in full service and attending meetings. So, you know, but I look back now and I think, thank God that my father woke up. I'm just so grateful at the time. Although at the time I didn't appreciate it. I didn't appreciate it back then because I was so deeply indoctrinated. I didn't appreciate it. But oh my goodness, I'm so glad my father woke up when he did, and he left the organisation. So yes, so so we going back to women being submissive, even whether a woman has a husband or she is has her husband doesn't go along to the meetings, then you know the elders still have this overseeing role to ensure that, you know, and they call them the fatherless children. Yeah, I did have a father, he just didn't come to the meetings. We were still called, you know, fatherless children, and therefore the elders in the congregation took it upon themselves as their duty to ensure that my mother was still overseeing us, her children, and instructing us as Jehovah's Witnesses. So they're still dictating you know, what we should do, when we should do, how we should do it, etc. And even down to what women should wear. The elders and the governing body feel that they are somehow the fashion police, and they instruct women around their clothing, that they have to be modest and modestly dressed. So women are not allowed to wear trousers, for example. That is strictly forbidden. And I remember once when I was pioneering, and I brought along a young lady to the Kingdom Hall for a meeting, and I completely forgot to tell her that she couldn't wear trousers, and she turned up to the meetings wearing the trousers and her heels and her low-cut top. And after the meeting, I was firmly scolded by the presiding overseer, that you know, why hadn't I reminded or told this young lady that she's not allowed to wear trousers and she needs to be modestly dressed and all of this. And so yes, I was duly corrected for bringing somebody to the meetings for being inappropriately dressed. So in that respect, women still have to be submissive, or are still expected to be submissive to a man in terms of, you know, the way they are dressed, even though, you know, they're not your husband. So yeah, this whole role of submissiveness is taken really seriously. So in terms of the roles within the congregation, women have no privileges whatsoever, and all roles are occupied by men. So men, and within the congregation, for those who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, as you are baptized and, you know, growing spiritually within your faith and your religion, then within your congregation, many people, particularly men, reach out for positions of what they call privileges. I personally don't see it as a privilege. I see it as an unpaid worker, but that's beside the point. They reach out for what's called privileges, and these privileges can range from operating the sound system, which is playing the music for the songs. It could be passing around the roving mic, so when there's question and answers sessions going on, you could be passing the mic around. It could be helping out when it comes to distributing books and the literature. It could be conducting a Bible study, giving a talk, or progressing to be a ministerial servant or an elder, which is part of the leadership team within the local congregation. And then after that, after many years service, they may reach out to become a circuit overseer or a district overseer, or strive further up the career ladder, so to speak, and want to go to Bethel, etc. So there is career opportunities. All of these are unpaid and voluntary positions, but again, all of these are set out for men. There are no such positions available for women, regardless of how long they have been serving in the organisation or been a witness of good standing, so to speak. The only positions, and it's not really position, but the only way that a woman can be seen to be adding value is, one, is she goes out in field service and become a auxiliary or a full-time pioneer. It's been a long time since I've been a Jehovah's Witness, so I don't know if they're called auxiliary pioneers. They were back in the day, so I'm sure my audience will let me know. And that was when you were sort of doing out in the ministry part-time or a full-time pioneer. So, you know, women can take on those roles, and again, those are all voluntary, unpaid positions. Or they can become a special pioneer, which means going and serving elsewhere in the country or across the world. Or some of them marry men who then become ministerial servants or elders, or have positions within the leadership team. And it's only really in that way that a woman has any role, but those roles are very secondary. They're not main roles, they're very secondary roles, and they're more assisting, and there's certainly not going to be any position of leadership or leading anything. The only other way that a woman has a role is, well, before I come to that, women are not allowed to speak publicly in the Kingdom Hall. So, for example, they can't give a public talk or lead a prayer or anything like that. Those are roles reserved only for men. In the Watchtower sessions, and usually on a Sunday, or in any meeting parts where a reader is needed, again, those are usually assigned to men. Women are not allowed to occupy those roles. So the only way that a woman can speak from the platform is in a couple of circumstances, and those are, one, in a situation where there are no suitable and qualified men available to lead a prayer or give a talk or you know, lead a group. It's only in those circumstances, but those circumstances will be very, very, very rare, because whilst I don't know the ratio of men to women who are Jehovah's Witnesses, I suspect from when I used to go, it's probably about, I would say probably there's slightly more women than men, although I can't be sure, and I'm sure again somebody will quote me. So in most congregations there will be sufficient men to take on those leadership roles. But in the very rare circumstance where there isn't sufficient men, then a woman is allowed to take on that role. But, and there's always a but, the but is she has to have her head covered. So, you know, whip out the handkerchief or whip out the tea towel or whip out a scarf. you know, a woman has to have her head covered. And again, that goes back to some Bible reference. So that's one way in that a woman can have a role. And the second way that a woman can speak publicly inside the Kingdom Hall is what I refer to as an illustrated part. So that is where they're given a demonstration. And this is usually where, well, as part of attending meetings for Jehovah's Witnesses attend meetings where they are instructed and taught how to do the preaching work. So what to say to people that they meet in the field ministry, when they knock doors or when people approach carts, etc. They're taught what to say, and they would do this by demonstration. And so a woman can be given a part in the meetings, is usually the terminology. They're given a part, and in this part they are allowed to talk for a few minutes. But again, usually they're not talking to a man. The person they're demonstrating with will very rarely be a man. It's usually another woman that they are having this dialogue with. So those are the scenarios where a woman is involved within the congregation. And of course, you know, they are encouraged wildly to go out and do the preaching work. So women have very little role, if at all, within the congregation, and certainly no role in terms of the leadership team, but yet they're really strongly encouraged to go out in the ministry, unpaid, volunteer, working in all kinds of weather, the rain, the snow. Here in England we get a lot of rain and snow, and when we do get the sun, even in the blazing sun, in all kinds of extreme weathers, they're encouraged to go out and spend copious amounts of hours out there. But when it comes to teaching within the congregation and publicly, that's not allowed. And I used to be a pioneer, and I used to dedicate a minimum of 90 hours out in the field service. And whilst I could work with a brother, if we were going to somebody's door and knocking on somebody's door, then he would have to take the lead. I couldn't take the lead because he, being a man, was there. Even though we're not married and we're not having a relationship, because he is a brother, a man, he has subjection over me, and therefore he would have to take the lead when it comes to the field service. He would be directing me in terms of where we're going to work. He would have to deliver the prayer before we start and when we end, and also when we go knocking on doors and talking to people. Again, he would be leading in that conversation. Sometimes he would look at me and say, "Have you got anything you want to add or anything?" So he'd provide opportunity for me to interject, but typically he would be leading the conversation. Sometimes within the congregation, and the congregation that I went to, it was very multicultural, and we had a lot of Caribbean women, and Caribbean women are very strong women. If you know any Caribbean women and you agree with me, leave a comment in the message box below. And if you don't know any Caribbean women, take it from me. Caribbean women are very strong women. And in our congregation, we had a lot of very strong, beautiful and amazing Caribbean women. And Caribbean women put up with no nonsense, absolutely no nonsense whatever. So I was often party to walking home with my mum with a group of sisters, usually about 4 or 5 sisters, all Caribbean women of my mother's age, and like the women were sort of walking in front of us or behind us, and us kids were like, you know, earwigging, trying to listen into their conversation. And the tone really was, they didn't agree with what was said or what the elders had instructed or the decisions that the elders made. And it was very much, well, do you know what, if I had made that, if I was in charge of that, that would never happen, or they were bang out of order to do that. So Caribbean women very much had their voice and would express their voice within their congregation, within their group. Now, a couple of those sisters had sons that were elders, and these sisters would, and I know this because, you know, women talk, you know, we do like to, you know, share information. And my mother used to be telling or talking amongst her peer group, her friends, and they used to say that you need to tell your son that this is not right, and that he shouldn't be, that decision shouldn't have been made, that is wrong. And whether or not it made a difference, I don't know. But being strong Caribbean women, they had to have their say. And a lot of what I saw and heard that was going on in the congregation, they just did not agree with it at all. But in the end, they had to put up with it. And, you know, I know, and, you know, I don't know whether any of the English sisters or the Irish sisters or any other cultural groups, the sisters in those groups, ever voiced their opinions privately. I'm sure they did. But Caribbean women were very forceful in their views. And I know for my mother, you know, if she didn't particularly like a decision, she had no qualms in going up to the elders and telling them. And I'm sure it got her into trouble a lot of times, but my mother was like, whatever, you know, because that was the strength of being a woman, you know, and women had no role in the congregation. But that just didn't stop the group of Caribbean women and sisters in my congregation from expressing their voice. And so it should be. So it should be. If we're all going to be affected by a decision, then everybody needs to have their say and not just a selected few. Sometimes within the congregation, it became known that there was a situation, and, you know, as women, women have a natural tendency to be the comforters, to be the helpers, to want to try and resolve a problem, or, you know, support. And, you know, I know many times growing up there were situations where it became aware that there was a situation, and the typical thing to do was to wait until an elder approached you as a woman to say, you know, as a mature sister, can you just have a word with so-and-so, or, you know, see if there's anything you could do. And that is the typical tone of an elder. If they're not ever going to ask a sister to be involved in a process, a decision-making or a decision-making process, but if they see that a sister needs a little bit of support, they might approach quietly on the side a mature sister and ask her to help. And I know growing up there was a couple of times that happened, And my mother was like, well, I'm not waiting for no man to tell me to go and help this sister. I ain't waiting for that. And quite rightly so. And my mother would like just go straight in there and offer support and assistance to the needy family. And that is something that I saw, and it's something I grew up with. So it's a good tool, it's good skills, and it's, you know, it's just a good way to live. Is when you see somebody in need, don't wait for a man to tell you to go and help. Go straight in there and do it. And I remember getting, told off, not formally, but, you know, elders having a quiet word with me and saying, well, has somebody asked you to go in and help sister so-and-so? I'm like, no. And it's like, well, really, you should wait until you're asked. And, you know, when I was growing up, I was quite a shy and timid person. I know you'd never believe it, would you? But I was quite a shy and timid person. And, but my heart was always in the right place. So I didn't ever need to wait for somebody to tell me, and certainly not a man to tell me to go and help a sister when she was in need. And I would just go and do that. I would do that, just straight in there. I'd be round to a house saying, you know, sister so-and-so, you know, how are things? Is there anything I can do to help you, etc., etc. And yes, unfortunately, the elders saw that I was meddling. And acting inappropriately, because they felt that I wasn't being very submissive and I should wait until I am asked before I approach people. And that just wouldn't work for me, because, you know, I just think that, you know, it's common decency to, if you see somebody in need, to go and help them. Why should you have to wait? So yeah, you know, Jehovah's Witnesses believe that a woman should be in submission to her husband, or to a man if she's unmarried. That the man is in submission to Christ, and Christ is in submission to God, and therefore there is that hierarchy. So the woman is bottom of the pile. And therefore, with that in view, they should learn in silence. Yes, learn in silence. They should be quiet. They should be seen wearing decent clothing, of course. You know, nothing below, nothing above the knee. No revealing tops. No trousers or jeans, nothing showing your bra strap. Well, you know, I'm sorry, but I would have a massive problem with that, because I know you can't see, and I deliberately set my camera so you can't see, but, you know, I don't even know why I'm telling you this, but I'm a busty girl. I am a busty girl, and unless I'm wearing a shirt right up to my chin, something is going to be revealed, you know. So I think if I was a Jehovah's Witness now, I would be disfellowshipped for indecent clothing, you know, seriously. They would have me out, you know, never to darken their doors again. It'd be like, get those things locked up, you know, wrap them up in bandages, or just stick them. They might as well just give me a burqa and be done with it, you know. But yeah, you know, and I'm like, come on, these are God-given, you know, these are God-given beauties. I can't hide them. I can't, only when I'm on camera and I've got the camera set to there. But yeah, so God, where was I? Yeah, so women must be in full submission to a man. even when it comes to her clothing, even when it comes to her shoes, stockings, everything, you know. It needs to be, you have to be submissive in everything, in your tone, your words, your actions. You have to be submissive, you know, because at the end of the day, us mere women were created just for the man's pleasure. So, you know, we were created for the sake of a man, and therefore, other than bearing children, cooking, cleaning up after him, and, you know, spending hours on the field service in order to make the congregation, the elders, or a husband look good, then we have no purpose. So, you know, it's really sad. It's really sad that that is the role of women in the Jehovah's Witness organisation today. And the saddest part is, the real tragedy of this is that because of these die-fast rules, they lose out on value. They lose out on the value that women can bring. So when they have their judicial meetings to decide on cases of wrongdoing, now, you know, whatever, I am not in favour of this judicial system. I'm not in fact, you know, somebody said to me once, when I sort of said that is outdated, archaic, and has no place in our modern system, they said to me, well, so I said to them, you know, what do you think of the Muslims using Sharia law? And their view was same. It's archaic, dated, it's wrong, it doesn't serve women well, and all of this. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's your view. But that's exactly my view of the Mosaic Law. It's dated. We're not under the Mosaic Law. So why are we still, or why do Jehovah's Witnesses still insist on using it? It serves no value. It serves no purpose. So, so I don't agree with using the Mosaic Law whatsoever. But they do. And if they did, if they insist on using it, then I think that there should be a role for women in that. There should be women in the entire leadership structure of the organisation. There should be, this just should be, because women can add such value. So, for example, in cases of child abuse claims and allegations, a child has to recount and relive their horrific ordeal in front of a panel of men, and men are not the most comforting and most supporting images that a child needs to see or wants to see when they're recounting an ordeal. You know, even if you look at in the modern world, and you know, when children are recounting child abuse, or women are sharing their stories and their experience of being raped, or you know, experiencing domestic violence, there is often a woman that they talk to, and there's a reason for that. There is a reason for that. And it's often because a woman or a child will often feel more comfortable talking to a female rather than a man. And I'm not saying in every situation, but in many situations, it's the abuser that it is often the man. So the Jehovah's Witnesses could really do with taking a leaf out of that, out of the modern system, and introducing women in the judicial process. I think women has a strong role right throughout the leadership, right up to the governing body. But, you know, let's start small. Let's start small and have women as part of the leadership team in the congregation. Now, when I stopped being a Jehovah's Witness, I went through a period of my life where I just didn't want anything to do with God and church. And then, you know, my illness really became apparent. It really came to the fore. And at the height of my illness, I really wanted to seek God. I really wanted to connect with him. So I started going to a church, and it was a friend of mine that had invited me to this church, and I was blown away by this church. And Jehovah's Witnesses always say, oh, you know, the churches, they're losing members and they're closing and rare, but Jehovah's Witnesses are growing. Not at this church. Not at this church that I was going to. This one church was part of a global church group, and it was growing so fast. It literally, if you did not, the services started at 10 o'clock, and if you were not there by 9:30, you would not get in the seat. You know, there was well over 1,000 people. There was people standing in the hallway, on the stairs, etc. It was huge. This church was absolutely ginormous, and the worship was phenomenal. I'd never known worship like I did at this church. It was nothing like the Jehovah's Witnesses, which is very hymnal. You know, it's like, you know, you go there, you know, stiff, very British, stiff upper lip, you know, in your suits and your songbook, and, you know, your chest up, your chin out, and, you know, you're just singing this song, and there's no emotion or nothing coming from it. And I'd gone from that to going to a church. It was a Pentecostal church, and the worship was just absolutely phenomenal. It was singing, it was praying, people were dancing in the aisles, they were just praising. It was just incredible. I'm tingling all over just thinking about it. And I was like, wow, is this what it means to worship God? I'd never in over 20 years experienced worshipping God. And I came away from the service and I felt like I had really worshipped God for the first time in my life. I had tears streaming down my face. My heart was full to exploding, and I felt like I was really worshipping God. You know, bowing down to worship God. It was incredible. But the reason I tell you that is because at this church, the role of women was so visible. And whilst the main pastor of the church was a man, they had a leadership team. And in that leadership team were women. But also pastors and their wives had a significant role. So, for example, they would have the main Sunday meeting, but then they would have outreach groups. So they would have women outreach groups, which were dedicated to supporting local single women in the community, for example. Or another group might be to support married women, or it might to support children or the elderly, etc. And these groups were all led by both men and women, young and old. So women had a visible role. You know, there was a breakout group on the Sundays for the children. So part of the worship on Sunday was for the entire family. And then part of the service, the children went to their little breakout group with their worship leader, and they did appropriate worship. And I'm going to do another video at another time about this, about inappropriate worship or inappropriate services that Jehovah's Witnesses children are allowed to sit through. Oh my goodness, that seriously is another video for another day, because I remember sitting through some Watchtower study articles and blushing till I was as red as my lipstick. So yeah, I'm going to do a video about that at another time. But yeah, so in these groups, you know, women had a role, a very significant and really important role, because the church recognised that women have a huge amount to contribute. So the leadership team of the particular church I went to was made up of men and women, and men and women came together and made decisions together for the benefit of the church, and it worked really, really well. So I just think that, you know, it's really sad that in this modern day and age, and especially, you know, we've seen so many churches, like the Catholic Church particularly, they've voted, and for the past couple of years women have had a significant role in the church as leaders, and many churches are doing that because of women's valuable contribution. But yet Jehovah's Witnesses, they will stick hard and fast to rules that they want to stick to for their means and their end. But when it comes to the benefit of the congregation and the community, they're not interested in. So yeah, so it's very sad that that is the role of women. I left when I was 22, 23, and I'm really glad that I'm out now, because to be honest, I don't think that the person that I've grown into could ever be silent. And that's what Jehovah's Witnesses expect their women to be. They expect them to be silent, to learn in silence, to be seen and not be heard, and to be submissive. And yeah, that's not, and having come from a Caribbean background, no, that's never going to happen. No, it would be very difficult for me. So yeah, so I would be really interested to know what your thoughts are. Let me know what you think about the role of Jehovah's Witnesses women, and yeah, I'd be interested. But thank you to the person that raised this question and this made this point, because it's, you know, I've loved talking about it. So do let me know if there's any other subjects that you'd like me to cover. I would be very happy to do so. So guys, listen, I'm going to end it there, but thank you so much. If you've got this far, extra brownie points for you. Okay, listen, thank you so much for watching and staying with me. I'm on a mission to hit my goal of 1,000 subscribers by the end of April. So please, if you've not subscribed, please hit that red subscribe button and click the notification bell so you will be notified of my next video. And if you have subscribed, then thank you for coming back and watching. So guys, have a wonderful day. It's cold, it's rainy, it's getting really dark here in wet, grey, cloudy, cold Birmingham. So I'm going to make me some dinner, and I will see you soon. Take care now.